Well, it's better than asking who is John Galt. But,
That's true. That's true.
You know, the whole Atlas Shrugged thing seems terribly inappropriate in the blockchain setting. Okay, sure. It's already on the hour, yeah? It's 11:01. Okay. Yeah, please, let's go ahead and get rocking. And well, they may update with respect to network time in a different way. Let me see, with respect to. Okay, so we have a lot to get through today. With luck, if we're efficient, we might be able to get through it all, and maybe even in record time. And so with that, I'd love to turn it over to Kelly and get a dev update.
Sure. Hi, everyone. We can move through this. I'm putting a link in the chat to the page that I'm going to share, and do a quick screen share here. All right, so this is community update number 57. At the top, you'll see that we are ending towards the end of our current sprint, which ends on next Monday. And then following the close of that sprint, we do plan to release our node 8.4. And you can follow the release plan to learn more about that, although admittedly it's a little light right now because I haven't completed the updates of all the tickets that will be in there, but that is the plan. We are continuing to work on our Mercury feature requirements documentation. There's a PR coming today related to cost accounting, which reflects a fair amount of the work that was done last week, which I'll talk more about in just a moment. We do have a meeting planned with Whiteblock tomorrow to discuss in more detail about ways that we can use this particular testing environment for hardening of Mercury once we're done with features. That's an important next step, and we look forward to working with them to get some support in our hardening efforts. The public testnet is still not yet available. You can follow the link to find out which particular issues are blocking that. We talk about those in terms of stability. Right now, one of the most critical ones is an out-of-memory error that Pavel is taking a deep dive in today, and Tomasz is supporting him by getting heap dumps off of our internal testnet. So we're hoping to make some strides on that in the near term, hopefully by the end of this week. As a reminder, the dev team met up in Poland last week. Most of the team was there, including Chris and Greg. Their work focused primarily on cost accounting and the wallet, and it resulted in a wallet design proposal. You can follow that link to learn more about that. We have been also talking following that session in Warsaw with other stakeholders in that, namely Dan Conley, to make sure that we're on the right track, and I think we are. There are a couple of refinements out there that we're going to pursue this week, and then look to have also ticketed work to complete the delivery of cost accounting later this week. So really profitable time very much well spent. You know, if you have any experience with meetings and meeting asynchronously and trying to get work done, you know the advantage of being face-to-face. And so we are very grateful to have had that time, and we'll look for other opportunities when that makes sense and when we can have an agenda that would benefit from that opportunity the most. We did, related to the node, if you are an early adopter on node and work from the development branch, or if you are one of our Tuesday test participants, it's very important that you know that as of today, the config file format changed in the dev branch. And there is a link in the README that you can read more about that. But suffice to say, if you are used to using the TOML file to support configuration, you need to make some updates and switch to the new format, which is HOCON. If you are typically use the release, this will be included in next week's release of 8.4. Some good news in the consensus world. We do have a PR. Dom did some investigation and figured out part of the cause of the unknown bug that we've been seeing in Tuesday tests, in which the Tuesday testers really helped us recreate in a number of scenarios yesterday. So many thanks to them for that help, and to Dom for his investigation work. He just got a PR out there today to help resolve some of that. And also, Kent continues to work on the assertion error, which is, we believe, related to the change in the Oracle. And there is currently a PR open, and we look to hope to get that closed in short order. Work continues. Daniel R is continuing work on the block storage solution. The main blocker right now is an integration issue between the DAG storage solution and its improvements, and then the new block store solution. Chris and I are going to meet with Daniel R later today to discuss that a little bit further. Also, this past week, and I guess the past 2 weeks really, is a big part of this sprint, tremendous changes in our test infrastructure and performance testing environments. Tomasz released a new version of our log aggregator, that's RDoctor version 0.3.3, and that worked really nicely for us in testing this week. Adam has worked primarily on redeploying the performance test harness. This is something that we used earlier around the release of RNode 7, and then as we moved infrastructure, we had not brought it back up yet. And so we've brought it back up on the Google Cloud services that we're using and have it set up so that it can run on a specified commit. There's Grafana dashboards that's displaying metrics, and then the plan for that truly is to get some benchmarks on performance and then use it against every commit to look for regression. And so that is in very good shape. We have a little bit more work to do on the contract that platform is going to use, but look to have that work completed by the end of this week as well. Ovidio has completed merging today to improve error messaging and rolling tests. And we look to see that work to help benefit the implementation of the wallet feature. And then finally, we have work in progress to provide better coverage for bonding in a unit test environment to make sure that we don't miss anything related to the ability for validators to bond to the network. And then, as an outcome of that, it will be in the reverse of unbonding from the network. All of our information is on developer.rchain.coop. You can find links to the wiki, to the release plan, to the current release. You can take a deep dive or just at a high level, and that's where we publish information about our development work. So that is a lot. Let me pause. Any questions?
Yes, Kelly. So you and I had talked about getting to a place with Testnet where we can shoot errant nodes in the head and allow them to restart and reset from the current state. So I understand that that's probably best facilitated when the block store is stabilized. But any more thoughts on that?
That's my understanding as well. That the key reason we want to have a block store is to support node operators or nodes in a testing environment experiencing either a crash or a specified kill, and then being able to come back up with a memory of where they left off, so they don't have to spend too much time trying to catch back up to the network.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
And I don't think there's nothing else that I'm aware of that would help contribute to that as much as the block store.
Good. So if we get the block store done, then potentially we could have that would unblock all the rest of testnet. So even the other errors which are currently blockers, we just shoot the node in the head and it starts up again.
Yes, although I think some of the errors that we're seeing are systemic, like they spread across the network. So it would mean, in short order, everybody kills their node and brings it back up.
But they could do that individually. It doesn't require coordination. They see an error.
Agreed. As long, I think that's somewhat accurate. Making sure that Bootstrap is back up would be critical to that.
Yep. Good. So we might have public testnet up and running sooner than resolving all those bugs. It's really just if we put the block store work in front of everything else and get that done, then we could have the testnet done as soon as we merge that in. Does that seem like a reasonable assertion?
I think it's reasonable. You know, again, a number of the errors that we're seeing, whether it's out of memory or errors related to consensus, do become systemic.
Understood.
Okay, and so yes, I think you're right. Yeah, we couldn't bring back nodes back up, but I think also
they may die and come back up and die and come back up, but that's really now more of a stability rather than not having one at all.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Well, that's very good news. Any other questions for Kelly? Going once. Going twice. Thank you so much, Kelly. Awesome. Okay, so now we want to, I wonder if Kenny is here to give an update on the governance, DGov conference he was at, or to give the report card. Is Kenny not here?
I don't see him.
Okay, all right, well, so in that case, why don't we switch things up just a little bit and have the RChain Asia go next. So since they're always at the tail end, we'll have RChain Asia go next. Jonathan, are you up to give an update?
I'm sorry, I need to relocate before I can. It's a little loud where I am right now.
It sounds good here, but we're not hearing any over noise.
Give me 5 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. All right. So then moving on, we're still waiting to engage with the arterial folks to bring them onto the Hangout and get them to talk about their their offering and how we can best serve them to do an MVP. But it feels like we're starting to get some nice traction with respect to folks who want to branch out and use the back end of RSong to do other kinds of applications. Just heard from someone in the ebook business who has an interest in wanting to do digital assets via the back end of RSong that way. So with that in mind, Ian, you said you were going to push the name game a little farther forward on rebranding the back end of RSong. Did you have any success with that?
Yeah, sure. There's an RSong channel in Discord that where there have been many great name suggestions, and just recently we've had some more feedback from the people who were working on developing RSong as to how general or specific we want to name this architecture, this template that RSong was built on. So earlier today, I was asking a friend, so what is RSong? And they said, oh, it's a music streaming application. And I kind of, head slap that, yes, it is, but what we're trying to demonstrate is what's under the hood. And I tried giving some analogies like a Mr. Potato Head, where we've built
That's
something
awesome.
we've built something which is much more multi-purpose. And some of the names reflect that. Like there was one name which was RChain Media Toolkit, and then that was generalized a little bit more to RChain Marketplace Toolkit, which was the one suggestion that was endorsed by Kayvon, who's kind of one of the principal developers behind the platform. But right now in that channel, there are only maybe 2 or 3 names that got upvotes. So we don't really have quite enough to do a poll. There may be 100 or so names that never received any upvotes, which is far too many for a poll. So even on our Zoom chat right now, we could do a little raise hand poll, what people think, if you want to play that game right now.
Oh no, that's a great idea. I'd love to get this one just done. I'd like to rebrand this and just move on.
So the reasoning here is not to get too specific into this is an application just for audio, and not too broad to say like this. We're going to have many such templates or frameworks or architectures for building out more specific applications. So I really love the idea of marketplace.
Yeah, I don't see it as a marketplace, because a marketplace is something else, right? That's I think about market making and price discovery and all those kinds of things, and that's not what this does, right? This is mostly about asset management. So that's why I liked Tracker, because it really is about tracking your assets. And I thought of, since we'd have to come up with an alternate spelling for Tracker, the other one that I thought of was Backer. Because it is the back end for an asset tracking solution. So that's another one. And just from a mimetic perspective, we've been doing the R plus something naming, and so maybe it's time to do something plus R, just to shake things up a little bit. But that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, so we're still a little bit in the weeds for coming up with just maybe 10 or so names that we can put to a broader vote.
Yeah, so
I'd encourage
do that by end of today or something, and just get a place for people to express their opinions and just get this puppy named.
Yeah, so let's encourage everyone to visit the RSong channel and give your input there. And if you see something you like, then put a thumbs up. Upvote it so we can cull through all these names and create more of a proper poll.
I vote for RoKit.
RoKit?
Yeah.
Or Rocket? I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Very good. Very good. Yeah, we're starting to get more and more of these. We're with RChain Europe this morning. We had a kind of nice discussion that's being spearheaded by Steve Ross Talbot around putting an Android front end to Dan Connolly's voting system as a sort of demonstration of the being able to do expression of will, expression of sentiment on the RChain platform in regards to cultivating a relationship with the Labour Party in the UK, which could be quite exciting and very much the kind of thing that we want to start seeing RChain being used for. So that's something that's, I think in the direction that we want to use 2019 for, which is a lot more sort of uptake and engagement from enterprise or sort of the government sector, those kinds of things. So yeah, that's another sort of toolkit that we should be able to promulgate. So let me check back in and see if we have. I see. Okay, so we might have to wait a bit for Jonathan to be available to give an RChain Asia update. Let's see. So we have a few other updates that I want to mention, and I would like to share with folks a little bit of brain candy. So one of the biggest ones is that we spoke at length with a group called Pure Tracks. So they have announced a blockchain-based streaming service And when we spoke with them, there was a real meeting of minds. The conversation was scheduled for an hour. We spoke for 30 minutes over that, so 90 minutes. And there's just a general feeling that the area that we've sort of scoped out in terms of blockchain and music is very, very much the right one of the most exciting and most fruitful areas to go after. And we're going to continue to touch base in terms of how we can best partner and how we can best support each other in terms of our efforts. But it was for me, it was a real validation of the kind of thing that we've been talking about, both in terms of how to go after the market, and then also that the market is one of the most important ones to go after. I think, Fabian, you were on the call. What was your impression?
Well, I'm pretty clear on the value proposition of what music and blockchain can do, and seeing the variety of companies that are out there in the field that are walking down that path of exploration, and seeing that there are certain technological features that we have available to us. I certainly believe that there is a opportunity for building something that will generate a lot of transactions on our platform. And I also believe that there's an ecosystem within reach through a variety of relationships that we have available to us. We just have to build the first piece, and then we will see how we are able to grow from that point. So there's opportunity for us, and there's also opportunity for us to have our proof of concept and present it to those that are out there that are working towards building theirs, and inviting them to use our tech, and us creating an opportunity to monetize that opportunity.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, one of the things that seems to be clear with respect to RSong is that there's a small delta from where we are to something that's significantly more usable by various potential demographics. So just a simple intake which builds on the existing RSong acquisition module that essentially puts a front end to pick up the content from a would-be artist or musician who's trying to get their music up on RSong would push the offering one step closer to something that's sort of a more realistic proof of concept. And it's actually within striking distance of where we are now, not very far from what we've got already. So I feel like we've sort of laid in a very good architecture.
Agreed.
Cool. Okay. Let's see. I don't want to. Okay, so Jonathan seems to be ready now. So let's turn it over to RChain Asia, and then we have a few more updates to go through. Go ahead.
Okay, so since last week, we've been pushing the educational opportunities. Jocelyn HJ, who by the way is Han Zhong. This is not HJ to be confused with HJ in Europe, but Han Zhong is our Korean marketing person, and our newest RChain Asia member, Stella, who we recruited from our education or our Roland class in Gimcheon, attended a conference, and a bunch of good connections were made. We're now in preliminary discussions with the city of Seoul, their director of education, to replicate what we did in Gimcheon at a national level through the Seoul government. There's now 2 Korean universities interested in having RChain/Roland classes and collaborations. And in Singapore, Peter Finn continues to work on discussions with one of the premier technical educational institutions down there. In regards to partnerships, we've had some preliminary discussions with a national telecom. I've got to keep that quiet, but it looks really promising so far. with respect to platform development, I've assembled or pulled together a bunch of people who've expressed interest in developing various components of a social networking system. One of the members characterizes it as becoming a better Steemit or better Facebook for traditional web thinking. So that pirate team, that stealth team is gradually accreting and doing requirements gathering and evaluating possible ways of deploying the R thingy as a component of it. I'll be giving a remote presentation to Singapore this evening. The events at this particular facility usually have on the range of 100 to 200 people. They're very well promoted and organized. So I'm looking forward to what comes from that. Peter Finn will be boots on the ground to speak with people, interact, collect business cards, and so forth. And with respect to our contributions to development and the tech stack, Chinese language node testing started last week. There were, Will was having some technical problems because of his hardware. So we're looking into getting accounts spun up on DigitalOcean, which worked really well for a class of 25 people in Korea. And so Joshi is going to help Will with that. And there's been expression by dozens of devs in the Chinese community to become involved with that. And we've identified, again, from our Gimcheon Korea class last month, somebody to run Korean language node testing. So Joshi, again, and some other people will be helping set that up so that we can really pound the platform and get lots of bug reports in and contribute in that fashion as well. So that's my update for today.
Awesome, Jonathan. Thank you very much. That's all good news. So one of the things I've been wanting to share with the community is, the result of the sort of meeting in Warsaw was that it looks like, I mean, we still have work to do, and I'm making no promises, but it looks like we have a much better handle on the user-facing features that are remaining, and they're coming up in a rather tidy way, and so I think we have a much shorter time frame to get those features done, and so we're Kelly and Chris and I and the management team are in the process of kind of getting that mapped out against the existing sprint schedules. But I'm very encouraged by what I've seen. We're much farther along in terms of what's been implemented, and also in terms of sort of the general team understanding. I think one of the things that was most encouraging, we did some comparison of a couple of different designs for the wallet feature as an example. And Kent came up with a really nice design as an alternate to the one that we have currently. And it was precisely because of the alternate design that we were able to kind of convey to the team why the design that we have is in place. Just to give some bit of a shadow or sketch of what happened. Kent's model is a very natural model. It's very close to what is done in Ethereum. And it essentially involves encapsulating a map from sort of accounts to it's a map of accounts is basically the idea. That's the simplest way to say it. Now the problem, of course, is that you'll have lots and lots of concurrent access to this encapsulated map. And so what you want to do is to have a kind of concurrent map. And if you look carefully, that is exactly what the tuple space is. So the tuple space really is intended to be a high performance store-backed concurrent map. And so once the team began to see the tuple space and the purse design in that light, then it became a lot easier to understand how the purse design was essentially the same as the other design, except that it provided a kind of a factoring of the crypto capabilities. So for a concurrent map, there's not a lot of security around the key access. So you in order to make it more like a wallet, you have to wrapper that key access in, and if you factor the security layers in a certain way, so then you kind of get the purse wallet and then wallet with a transaction logging capability. And so I'm just passing along some of the discussion and dialogue that went into some of the time that we spent in Warsaw to give a sense that we are actually much farther along than I think any of us suspected. And as a result, I think we're going to have some pretty heartening and encouraging sprint schedules. I don't want to make any more promises along those lines, but I do want to sort of provide some color to what has come out of the Warsaw trip, in my estimation. Chris, did you have anything you want to add to that thought?
No, I think that's pretty good. I mean, the overarching theme, though, is having us all in the same house for 3 days is a much more efficient way to blaze through these design problems we were running into.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It was a time well spent, but you know, and again, I don't want to make any promises in terms of delivery schedule just yet. But I think it wasn't just that it was more efficient, but I think we discovered that we were considerably farther along. Another example that comes to mind is with respect to the cost accounting. The biggest concern was that sort of in sort of, you know, standard sprint-based development mode, there were sort of two different effect structures that were used to track so the accounting with respect to normalization versus the accounting with respect to evaluation. And which meant that it, you know, at least it was theoretically possible without a lot of argumentation. Otherwise, it was theoretically possible to kind of have cost accounting, two different views of the same cost accounting with respect to you know, the evaluation of a particular contract. So that would be a pretty serious error that we'd want to not have happen. And so the kind of the best way to approach that particular error has to do with kind of cleaning up the use of effect management, without going into the details of how to do effects using monads and monad transformers. The main point was that probably the smoothest and cleanest way architecturally to address it would be to clean up the effects stack. Now there was we sort of went back and forth that maybe we could have a what's called an impure solution in the interim while we were waiting to get the effects stack cleaned up. So keep sort of like a concurrent counter, not under the monadic regime. And then when the team went back and did a kind of assessment of that, what we ended up seeing was that the effect stack cleanup looks like, we've been working on it steadily for about 2 months, and getting that cleaned up is now, we're seeing the end of that. So potentially within the next 2 weeks, we could see that done, which means that the major blocker on the non-Casper side, on the evaluation side of cost accounting, would be done. That would be complete. So that's within striking distance of a single sprint. So again, that's an example of how, all being in the same room, same house, enabled us to see that the light at the end of the tunnel is approaching us much more rapidly than we thought. Anyway, so I just want to prepare the community. I think we've got some good news coming down the pipe, and I, for one, have been very excited about having this kind of news with respect to development. So let me stop now and take any questions from the community on. Take any questions with respect to that. So any thoughts, worries, concerns?
Hooray!
Yeah.
I was gonna, Greg. We talked yesterday about potential community engagement with regards to the validator rotation. Did you already talk about that today?
So we haven't talked about that. That's the next thing on the list.
Okay.
Yeah. So the another thing that came out of the sort of high intensity engagement was looking at the validator incentives, and Kent spotted a really important sort of gap or something that needed to be addressed in terms of how we were dealing with the validator incentives. Let me see if I can lay this out, and we want the community to think about this and get back to us on it. The issue is that queuing up to be bonded, there's no guarantee on the time when a validator who has sort of thrown their hat into the ring to be bonded will be bonded, and so that represents a significant barrier for someone who's trying to do cost planning, right? So they need to be able to spin up hardware, and so if they throw their hat into the ring, the question is, when do they provision that hardware? If they provision it right away, then that hardware is potentially laying fallow for some period of time before it's deployed against nodes that are garnering transaction fees. So then the question becomes, is there a way around that? So one option that we explored was that after a certain point, say just arbitrarily, let's say 18 months, that validators who have been bonded and are running for that period of time become eligible to be rotated out via random selection. So you have someone going out the door and someone coming in the door, and the person going, the validator that's going out the door is, if there isn't no one that has elected to unbond at that point, then a validator would be rotated out. Now, I think there were a lot of people, I think Ned, Chris, myself, who felt that there might be kind of both business and psychological reasons why this is not exactly the sort of thing we want to do. On the one hand, if there's a random rotation, it becomes hard to do resource planning on the back end of this, spinning down hardware and that sort of thing. On the other, it's hard to do good calculations with respect to revenue and rate of return without some kind of floor or ceiling. So that's another concern. So what we came up with as a kind of alternative solution to being randomly rotated out is to have a grace period. So when a validator throws their hat in the ring to be, or a candidate validator throws their hat in the ring to be bonded, they get notified that they've now been selected to be bonded, and then they have some period of time to marshal their resources, to throw the switch on provisioning the hardware. So this seems to be, at least at first blush, the team felt satisfied with this solution, but we decided to give ourselves a little bit of time to review this versus the other alternatives. So now I'm also throwing it out to the collective intelligence of the community here, to get some thoughts about what people might see as pros or cons for this particular solution. So let me just stop and check and see, does everyone understand the issue and then the proposed alternatives?
As I understand it,
go ahead.
As I understand it, the only real issue here is whether we want to phase out validators if we have too many. Is that correct?
No. So part of the issue is, do we want it to be the case? So you could potentially have validators that decide to have a stranglehold on a particular shard. They just sit there and they never rotate out. Now there are economic incentives for them to rotate out, because they don't get a big chunk of money that's owed to them unless or until they rotate out. So they're accruing fees, and their bond is there, and they're only being paid out a small portion of the fees that they're accruing unless or until they unbond. Now,
right, so they have the economic incentive.
They have the economic incentive, but there's a double economic incentive, right? Because if the token is appreciating in value, so the market fluctuations with respect to the valuation of the token also provides a pressure to unbond. So they have economic incentive, but it might be that for some parties there's a higher incentive to sit there and be the gatekeeper for all the transactions. We have to include that as a part of our game theory.
So wouldn't it be that they I guess we have you have a monopoly of shards.
Potentially you have a monopoly in a shard. Yes.
In a shard, yeah. And it seems like admitting other validators would be what you want, but
right, yeah. So
force them to admit a new validator.
Right. So if you have a fixed number of slots in a shard, then you have this issue of, do you have sufficient incentives to have parties rotate out? And then there's a secondary issue, which is not so secondary, and that is that someone wanting to come in, right, if they don't have a bounded time on when the hardware literally has to be active, then they in order to to address their risk, they have to provision their hardware up front or for some period up front, and then potentially eat cost on that hardware until they begin validating. So
sorry, Greg.
Yeah.
If we have rotation, it just kind of averages out, right? As a validator, I don't care if I'm actually actively validating, as long as in the end I get X amount of validation, I know I'm gonna make X amount of money. And if I don't make enough, and I'll just unbind myself and just get out, and might not come back, or maybe come back when conditions are better. But it's really similar to proof of work, when some miners shut off whenever they think it's not economical. So I don't think as a validator I care if I'm actively validating, but as long as I'm in the queue and I know I'm validating X amount of time, and that will make me X amount of money, Y amount of money at some point, it's really hard to kind of calculate how much I'm going to make, right? Because
that's right.
So many variables.
Yeah, that's right. So we're arguing that there needs to be a tighter bound on expected return. There needs to be a tighter box on the expected return in order to make it reasonable for a potential validator to make the business case to themselves, right? They want to be able to say, with this much investment, I get this much return, right? And so it is possible to kind of tighten up that discussion by saying, first of all, you're guaranteed some window, whether it's 18 months or whatever it is, you're guaranteed some window, and that window is correlated more tightly to, say, transaction volume than it is to it's correlated more tightly to transaction volume than it is calendar time or wall clock time. So that's possible. The other way around is to say we leave it entirely up to market conditions, right? So validators can just sit there if they want, but potentially the economic pressures are pretty heavy to get out in order to kind of have a clear point where they're bringing in return, and then also have a grace period for validators coming in to provision their resources.
So I mean, personally, I might be wrong. Maybe others think differently. Because the crypto market is so volatile, I don't think a tighter bound, like anyone cares about a tighter bound at this point. And in the future, I think the platform will just accommodate maybe 1,000 validators instead of 100, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, I think Kent made a write-up. Maybe we can kind of bring the question to the members in a different document, and people can kind of vote. Maybe that's kind of a new governance method we could use, and then the board can decide. But I mean, I'm speaking only for myself. I don't think anyone, like validators, will care if it's like 5% or 6%, because the rev will be much will have a higher volatility in the first couple of years.
Okay, so that's a good perspective. I really appreciate your perspective. Anyone else who wants to weigh in? It's really useful to have the incoming, some thought from the rest of the community on this point. So yeah, I think we probably laid out the different options and the kind of thinking behind them, and yeah. So if the community would like to speak to that, we're all ears. I don't have a good sense of which Discord channel to put this in, but we'll think of one and let people know in short, not too distant future.
Greg, are we on the subject just of node staking, or is this for investment overall?
we're just talking about validators.
Okay.
Yeah. So then, so I wanted to address something that came up in our Telegram channel. We've addressed it several times in the last 24 hours, but I want to make it really, really clear to all of those people who are in the RChain membership, the co-op membership, and to those who are sort of in the wider community, that we don't admit, you know, physical threats. It's just, it's not acceptable to use that kind of language. That's not how we conduct ourselves, and not useful dialogue in any way, shape, or form, and certainly will be met with swift response from the cooperative. So in general, it's really, really important to keep the dialogue to the kinds of issues like we were just discussing, where it's substantive. There's a clear set of options to contemplate and discuss, and then to move towards the kind of a decision that everyone feels that they can get behind. So that's how we want to conduct ourselves. I think in general, we really want to stay away from dialogue that gets us into trouble like that. With that, I also want to say that I think I've heard I've heard a lot of people have come to me directly and to the co-op more generally with respect to the trading behavior of various parties within the cooperative community. For parties that do legitimately hold rock, however they came by it, I don't think that the community would be very comfortable with the co-op as rock police. I think, but more importantly, rather than to address it that way, if people feel that there is a significant value to a particular rock position in the marketplace, then that represents a fiscal opportunity. So, for example, if and this is just an example, if it turns out that the trading behavior of Reflective Ventures is something that is of a concern to the community, and they would like to see different trading behavior, then that's what the marketplace is for, and that's what being members of the co-op is all about. People can cooperate to find good solutions to see the kind of economic outcome they'd like to see. Let me give a simple example. So if it turns out that Reflective is trading because they are under particular business pressures, then those parties who would like to see a different price for rock or a different position for rock relative to other tokens, they could step in and ask Reflective how they could help. One possibility, and again, this is just a possibility amongst dozens that I can think of just off the top of my head, they could offer to take over or help out with various portfolio companies. I could imagine that there are a block of investors who might go through the portfolio companies together with Reflective and say they would like to find a way to help out with those particular portfolio companies. And that, to me, seems like an enormous economic opportunity. I don't see why people aren't exploiting that to their advantage much more aggressively. That's what the cooperative's all about, right? We don't have to sit here passively and say, oh my gosh, what's happened to the rock? Oh my gosh, people are dumping. No, I think you know, if we dig a little bit, if we go into the behaviors of various people who are trading within the marketplace, it might be that there are significant business opportunities to be had within this community. So don't be passive, and don't look to the co-op to be the only solution for various economic situations that people see or desire. Talk amongst each other. That's what the cooperative is for. So Reflective is, has been a very active member of this community, and I can imagine that investors within the co-op might want to engage Reflective directly to see what business opportunities are there. So I really, really suggest that we start learning how to work together. We start learning how to cooperate. There is so much opportunity here. So let me stop there and just see if people have understood what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would like to really applaud you for saying this. Vlad actually posted a couple tweets early this year, and he sort of gave a diagnosis of what ails the project. And he said that a lot of people had fallen into a sort of a complacency or an assumption that the co-op is pretty much operated exclusively from Seattle, and that there was not really the possibility of taking on individual initiative, that we had all sort of become cowed or fearful or something. And that's what I'm trying to do with a bunch of my initiatives in finding people that are clearly passionate and qualified and capable of helping the project and doing matchmaking so that they have a sense of mission and purpose. And I think all of us in the co-op, in co-op proper, Europe, Asia, there's lots of things that can be done without much effort. They just take a little sparking.
I'm so with you, Jonathan. Right. I mean, and one of the things that's astonishing about this community is how brilliant and creative and risk taking and all of those wonderful qualities that make up the people that have come to this particular community and make up this community. So I think it's really time to sort of dust off those properties and start employing them to work together to solve some of our problems.
Yeah, and can I just say also, anybody who's entrepreneurial, I mean, we're thinking of a new name for our song, but the framework is still there. The framework is valid. You could spend a couple weeks, with your dev chops, and all that infrastructure is there for your taking, and you could just spin up a whole new idea that nobody's thought of and have something on the blockchain ready to go.
That exactly, you could do that, or you could go work with one of the portfolio companies that doesn't yet have an MVP and find a way to take the back end of our song to help get them faster to an MVP, right?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
And that would enable them to lend more capital.
Yeah.
Which would in turn, make the rock more valuable. So there's just, tons and tons of opportunity here. We don't just have to sit on our hands and go, sky's falling.
I wanted to make a comment that keys off that as well. It actually came up earlier when it was mentioned that there's a ebook service that is looking at the unnamed RThingy as a platform. And when I hear that, what I really hear is there should be 10 ebook services that all might want to approach it with their own solutions. And sure, maybe they will find advantages to working together, but as a platform, we benefit by having many different approaches all work on the platform simultaneously. And we need to see that we have our onboarding infrastructure in such a way that if we suddenly had 50 new teams next week that want to use the RThingy, we can direct them and give them the support without, being a burden on ourselves, because that's where the future and that's where the opportunities are. is not in having the official ebook solution for RChain, but creating the environment where 20 ebook solutions want to get on board.
Absolutely, absolutely, 100% agreed. So I think this is a fantastic note to end on. I have a 12 o'clock I have to dash off to. Thanks to everyone. I really, really appreciate the conversation. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys next week.